Beverly Engel, in her book, The Emotionally Abusive Relationship, says, emotional abuse does not continue unless the abused partner allows it. So welcome to this video where we will be exploring why people stay in emotionally abusive relationships, and if you are being emotionally abused in your relationship, how you can stop it. I'm Karen McMullen, and today we are live from the lakeside forest for a little change of scenery, and it's also Andrea J. Lee's birthday today, which kind of inspired me to make the video today. So I thought it would be fun to invite you for her birthday to make sure you check out her social media and follow her, since this whole series is only in existence because of her inspiration and her inspirational story, which we will be hearing more of today. So to find her social media, I will link that in the description box. And let us get right into today's message. Now, I have this handy book with me right here, The Emotionally Abusive Relationship by Beverly Engel, because this is definitely not my area of expertise. It's an area of interest. It's an area that I think is very important, which is why I was inspired to do this series of videos. But ultimately, this is the book that will really help you. So if you are actually in this kind of situation right now and you're looking for support and clarity, this is what I would recommend that you get as your hands on as soon as possible. And I will again link it in the description box so that you can grab your copy, and you'll find so much helpful resources in here, and it's just going to really help you. It can be kind of confounding to try to understand why people stay in emotionally abusive relationships, especially when they know that they're being emotionally abused. But it's actually very common, and in this book, Beverly goes into depth on why people end up staying. And the core one is called repetition compulsion, and I will read the definition. An unconscious drive to repeat the same type of abusive relationship we ourselves experienced as a child in an attempt to accomplish a new outcome. It drives us to relive the same story over and over again in the hope that this time the ending will be different. And this isn't literal, so you go to any good therapist will be able to help you identify your own repetition compulsion and how you're repeating stories unconsciously from childhood. But for example, if you were raised by parents who provided for you materially but weren't really present emotionally or able to really hold space for you emotionally or even give attention to your emotions, you're very likely to repeat that same feeling in your adult relationships, where maybe your partner's emotionally unavailable or ignores you on that emotional level, and that you're in a way trying to overcome that by gaining and efforting at getting their approval and attention emotionally, even though they're not present with you in that way. Repeating that same pattern from childhood. And then of course the classic, where if you had an alcoholic parent or a parent who is very angry, then you're likely to attract a partner in adulthood who is alcoholic or angry, or to become that yourself. And the key to this is that it's unconscious. So even though it might seem very obvious to a trained therapist, professional who can look at the situation from the outside and see it clearly, to you, if you grew up in a certain kind of environment, that can be just what you think is normal, and you're completely unaware that you're creating that same situation in adulthood, and that doesn't have to be the way that it is. One thing I do love about this book is that she has a questionnaire in here about childhood that can help you see whether or not you did actually experience emotional abuse or emotional neglect in childhood that would likely lead you to recreate that type of situation in adulthood. and that is on page 65. On page 95, Beverly goes on to really share some of the key things that set people up to likely create situations where they are in abusive relationships. So I found it a little bit too revealing almost. I certainly identified with quite a few of these. She shares, the following is a list of personality traits that set one up for emotional abuse. A strong desire to avoid confrontation. A tendency to pretend things are better than they are. A tendency to feel responsible for others. A tendency to blame oneself for problems in a relationship. A fear of being alone. A tendency to doubt oneself, including one's perceptions. A tendency to make excuses for another's behavior. A tendency to be naive about others and to believe that love makes one a better person. So if you have any of those, even just, for example, like a fear of being alone is a huge one, that could make you stay in a abusive relationship because part of you just doesn't feel like you're going to be okay if you're alone. And that's going to be amplified if you feel unsafe at the prospect of being alone, if you're financially dependent on your emotionally abusive partner. So if that is the case and you do feel unsafe about potentially ending the relationship, then in that case you need support. You need outside support. You need resources beyond what you yourself are able to provide for yourself, whether that's through like a social service or family and friends, but you need support. So give yourself that support that you need. How did it happen that your husband was willing to stick this out?
Something my husband and I have laughed about before is a scene out of Good Will Hunting, the movie. Um, in it, the character played by Matt Damon, the math prodigy, is Irish, and he's in a relationship with a a lovely person, and it is somewhat abusive. And at one point, his character says, "Well, I'm Irish, so if you want to break up, you're going to have to do it because I can put up with anything forever." and and whether that has to do with Irish people or other cultures or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But that was the scene in the movie. I think there are lots of cultures that have that, tolerance of suffering and stuff because of their histories. Well, we joke about that now, that because Mike is in fact part Irish, there was something about him that was very, sort of stubbornly committed to seeing it through, or whether it's true or not, it's like, well, better the devil I know than finding some other trouble some other place. um I definitely would say that he sacrificed a lot. He almost sacrificed it all. It's not too much to say that he really felt like life wasn't living at a certain point, because there was just this person that was supposed to love him, that was supposed to nurture him, that was supposed to be his soft place to land, was actually like dangerous to his psyche, and that there wasn't anywhere else he could go. That is the truth of it. And he really should have left, I think. He really, it was really bad for him to be with me. And so I can't really answer for him specifically exactly what it was that allowed him to stay. The love that I have for him at this moment would absolutely tell him to get the bleep out, get out. This is really just not okay. Um, what caused him to be able, or what caused him to stay, I think, kind of from a psychological perspective, from, because I now work with people to talk with them about this from time to time. And what I've learned is that when you have been abused before in your family of origin, you can definitely feel like it's your fault when you're in a relationship where your spouse or your partner is abusing you. It's just a repeat, and it's familiar. It feels like the way love is supposed to feel. It feels like there's no other choice because love has always felt this way. And also, you can feel very helpless. Like there's, you know, like as with many domestic violence victims, it's hard to leave. It's really hard to leave. I don't know. I feel very, I mean, obviously, I'm extremely lucky. I can't, it's not just that he gave me a second chance. He's given me like 2,000 chances. And, you know, my hope is that now it's like it's obviously his reward is to be now like able to live the life he wants and get the support to really not be judged for what his choices are and to, you know, make mistakes and not be fearful, do things that he regrets and, whatever, and just be a whole human, like a recovered, rehabilitated, confident and safe enough to seek that the happiness side of things. So there's a saying, I think it's Brene Brown, that says, you can't selectively numb, right? So if we have been capable of feeling so much like sheer terror and fear, and we have still loads of happiness to still feel.
That's awesome. How did he respond to you deciding that you were being emotionally abusive and that you were going to do something about it?
So if we have been capable of feeling so much like sheer terror and fear, and we have still loads of happiness to still feel.
That's awesome. How did he respond to you deciding that you were being emotionally abusive and that you were going to do something about it?
Well, he was like, it's about fucking time, you know. Because he had been saying that, so he was like, you need to stop, like every chance he got, in every tone of voice, every means possible, he had been communicating that to me. And, for a time I fought it. I was like, well, no, I have legitimate things that I'm upset about. And, I rationalize this and like, this is how it always is. This is normal. Like I didn't really raise that. Well, you raised your voice too, blah, 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 all the stuff. But, do you know, sort of a touchy kind of intense topic, but do you know of the existence of these fighting dog rings?
No.
So this is underground thing that happens apparently where dogs are abused and created, like they're made to fear, and then they're pit against each other to fight each other in these fighting rings. Or also like cockfighting rings that exist in the world, as well. So these dog rings are very instructive when it comes to understanding abuse. It's a very potent and sometimes difficult metaphor, but when a person has been abused enough, they're going to start to have, like, it's like violence is catchy, just like what I said earlier. They're going to start to have this like fight response because they have to protect themselves. And so I think that, along the way, Mike found his voice. He started to fight back in a way that he never used to in the beginning. He decided that there was a line that was enough is enough. And that was a good thing. That was a good thing that came out, like that gift in dirty paper that I said to him recently, even I think sometime last year, where it's like, another thing that's great that's happened is that, you will never say yes to that kind of behavior towards you ever again. That line. There's just never, it's like, oh, I'm out. So we need that for everyone. We need for everyone to know what's not okay. One of the questions that you had previously mentioned in a post, I think, Karen, is that you shouldn't give an abuser any accommodation. You shouldn't accommodate an abuser.
Yeah, it was you cannot accommodate a bully.
I found that really interesting.
Katie Hendricks said that. Yeah, she was talking about Trump and how right from the beginning when he began pushing the line of what's true, what's not true, and in establishing himself as a bully, that there was no pushback, no meaningful pushback, and so there was accommodation right from the start, and that just gave him more and more leeway.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's right, that when you are encountering abusiveness, it's like in teaching in schools, when you're the substitute teacher, it's better to be firm right up front, hold the line on the rules, and then later you can soften them, but be strong up front. Because, yeah, as soon as there's like a soft line there, then for a person who doesn't have control or emotional awareness, and the ability to be considerate towards other people, then they're just going to keep going. And that inconsistency of holding consequences is not going to help. Honestly, another way of thinking about it, Karen, that you might be interested in is that I think in terms of our emotions, humanity is going through like a life cycle, and we're teenagers right now, throwing tantrums all over the place. Asserting ourselves and like piercing everything and like going through our goth phase. And I love the goth phase. It's always so fun. um, and lines, rules, consequences are all really important when we're bringing up a teen. If that teen doesn't get that feedback, they're just going to keep pushing. And I think that applies to bullies and emotional abusiveness.
In her book, Beverly gives a very thorough 8-step program for how to stop being abused. And so I don't feel comfortable sharing that because in the book she really gives a more in-depth explanation of every single one of the steps, and I wouldn't want to lessen the importance of being thorough with those 8 steps. So I'd just like to highlight to you that they exist and a few key points, but this is by no means thorough enough to give you all that you will need in order to really make a total powerful shift if you are being emotionally abused. Of course, the first step is to come out of denial and to really face and accept that you are in fact being emotionally abused, and to totally come to terms with that yourself. The next several steps are about doing inner work to explore why you chose an abusive partner and why you are putting up with emotionally abusive behavior in the first place, and where did this abuse originate. So it's an inward look, and again, this is best supported by a therapist, or at least by following the instructions in the book, which is from a therapist. But this is coming back to that same idea of the repetition compulsion, and that basically until you do that inner work to finish that unfinished business, you're very likely to create and recreate these types of situations over and over and over again. And finally, with the new awareness that you have, you can confront your partner and set boundaries. And one of the things I really appreciate about this book by Beverly is that she doesn't totally discount the abusive partner, that they won't necessarily be able to recover. She does say, if you set boundaries, you can potentially stay in and create a very healthy relationship, which is shown to us by Andrea J. So I just think it's such a powerful example. And this is highlighted by Andrea in her story. So at the end of the day, if you don't want to be on the receiving end of abuse, you need to become aware enough of what you can and won't tolerate, and to set boundaries, and not only set them but continue to reinforce them so that they are respected. In conclusion, Beverly says, no one gives you your power, you have to take it. And that's at the core of what needs to happen in order to stop being abused. Sincerely hope that if you're dealing with this, that you get your hands on a copy of Beverly's book and get the support that you need. and make a change. It's definitely possible, and I feel like that is the whole point of this series of videos, is just to emphasize how you can make a change and how others have done it, and that it is possible. And again, a huge thank you to Andrea for her body of work and her research and her life experience, and how she's now sharing it in such an empowering way. Much love. Take care.